We're back with one more down. Today we have Coach Mark Assion, graduate of Cardinal Mooney, class of 1992. Longtime friend of mine, friends through a mutual friend. Watch you progress from the time we were teenagers, through college into adulthood. So it's going to be a pleasure to, get some of that backstory about who you are, some of your experiences, playing the game of football, coaching the game of football, and then, obviously teaching and going into new territory as an administrator. So I'm glad to have you on tonight. It's a great pleasure for me because I know you on a personal level, but to kind of get some insight and, thoughts and picking your brain about your approach to the game and what it's done for you. I'm glad to have you on. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Ron. It's nothing I wouldn't do for you. You know that.
Absolutely. Us being neighbors by proxy, you
Yes.
come down to the south side, spend a lot of time down on Winona, messing around with me and Batch.
Yep.
So for you, going back into your memory bank, can you tell us about your start in that Youngstown area and how you became to be Mark Assion?
Well, my parents were both from the Youngstown area. My dad was from Struthers. My mom was from Youngstown, South Side, and they went to Mooney. There's some craziness there involved, but we'll get to that later, I'm sure. But long story short, I grew up first couple of years. I was on Judson on the South Side, right over there by Conroy's and Glenwood Avenue. Got a lot of my experiences down there, especially in the park, because that's where we all met up as kids. Everybody was down there. And, as I got older, my folks moved out to Boardman. I felt the calling always back towards the city just to be with my guys. And I'm happy to be here right now.
As you think about that time period of your life and living on that Glenwood corridor, doing what I'm sure you did, like most boys of our era, getting out into the neighborhood, having experiences with different individuals that you cross paths with, taking advantage of Mill Creek Park being right there. But, you're not really from Youngstown if you're not playing rough and tumble on a side street and coming home with torn up pants.
Hey, listen, I don't want to hear about it. If you ain't playing with a rolled up ball of aluminum foil, you ain't played rough and tumble, my friend.
So for you, what is your first entryway into athletics and sports? What's that first significant memory that stands out for you in that realm?
Well, for me, I grew up playing catch with my dad in the backyard. And those are some of my fondest memories of my father, is just being able to throw a ball around, whether it was a football or a basketball or a baseball. Dad liked the softball best because it fit his hand a little bit better. And just growing up playing like that. And then the neighbor kids started coming along. I mean, PJ Fecco, who was a longtime coach at Cardinal Mooney, was right across the area there on Shields, right across from Glenwood. And Chucky Regroot, Mike Mascarella, Dave Beal, all these guys went to Boardman. Chucky went to Mooney with us. The Bodner brothers, who went on to play collegiately at Lafayette and Bowling Green. Just had some wonderful neighbors and memories growing up with the game. I mean, we always try to hang out with the older kids in the neighborhoods. And, we sometimes got shunned because we were the little ones, but we try to scrap with them every chance we got. The Hogan family was over there. And then down the street were Dapolitos. And it was just a good time growing up.
Now you bring up that important theme of, playing catch with your dad. I think for a lot of us who are essentially 70s babies, fathers play an important role in shaping who you are as a young boy and a man, and kind of give you that push start in figuring life out, if you will, as you're coming up in a place like Youngstown. And when we're talking about 70s, early 80s, we're talking about a different landscape in Youngstown, a lot more populated, a lot more communal. Now, for you, can you give some insight into the type of man your dad was? I know when we talked the other night, you spoke of his military experience. How did his experiences in life shape you and your brothers and your family?
Well, I think if you start right at the get-go, he was the youngest child in his family. Um, his older brother, Jack, had been a Roman Catholic priest, but he was 12 years older than my dad. So, by the time Dad was in high school, Jack had been a priest. Jim was in there too, but they were shaped by their father, who had worked in the steel mills. And then the brothers all took their time in the steel mills at one point in time or another. When my dad graduated from Mooney, he did join the Marine Corps, and he was in there for a while. Did some time in Vietnam, did some time in the reserves, come back home, and was able to settle down with my mom, and stayed in the Marines for a little while there, and then went to work for the Ohio Bureau of Rehabilitation Services Commission. And he lived a life of stewardship. He went out after that and really worked hard to get handicapped veterans and handicapped individuals employment. And, from my father, I've definitely learned, not just discipline, but the act of service and giving back. The world's a big place, as my dad would tell us. And, whatever little corner we're in, we'd like to have a little bit of influence on it. And that influence that we have, we want it to be positive. And that's a big memory of my father for me.
Now, when you say that he's a career Marine and military man, a lot of what comes to mind initially, you would think, hardcore, grizzled guy. Was for you though, did any of that come into play in terms of how your family was structured, or would you characterize it and describe it more as traditional and open and caring?
I'd say it was a combination of the two. In that, my father set up that kind of the household to go on a daily regiment, up at certain times, cleaned up, hairbrush, teeth brush, ready to get out the door and go, and come in and make sure that if you were coming home from school, you were doing your homework right away. And then there was dinner time. Growing up 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade is when I had the most memories of my dad, because he'd take us to practice, and then Mom would usually pick us up and drive us home. But we had a ball growing up. I had a great childhood. My dad was regimented to what he needed, but he also loved and cared about us. I mean, my dad was a God-fearing, God-loving man. And, it's really funny because when he passed on a lot of his traits in terms of religion to us boys. And, he gave me and Michael, well, Mom did, some of his rosary beads. And, those things kind of hold dear too, because we were a real big family of faith, no doubt.
Now, to balance out a man who has had those experiences, having to go to Vietnam, defend the country, make a way for himself and his family. Your mother served as a career-long educator. Can you talk about her and her influence and what she means to the Asen family?
Well, I don't know if anybody knows a sweeter mother than mine. For God's sakes, everybody calls her Saint Mary, right out of our Roman Catholic roots. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. My mother, God love her, she's 80 years old. She's still going. She's got that abundant energy that, a kindergarten teacher needs to have just to be able to get in through and out of every day. But she was shaped up on the south side on Chalmers. Her father was the manager of Powers Auditorium, which is now the Dior Center. And her mother was a newspaper writer. And Mom grew up going to St. Pat's, and then on to Cardinal Mooney. And she and my dad had dated some in high school. And then when he left for the Marine Corps, she actually felt a calling towards faith and became a nun. And she was in the convent, right at 18 and a half, 19 years of age. As a nun, she was teaching, I believe it was second grade at St. Rose and Girard for a couple of years. And, ever since then, she's progressed on. Dad came home and she ended up leaving the convent and eventually marrying my father, and they raised us. And, after she left the convent, she ended up teaching at Hubbard for a year. And then she was at Boardman for 40 some years. It's just, she had an unbelievable career, and she's beloved. She loved and cared for us boys, but she also wasn't going to put up with any of our crap. I mean, I can remember, we lived in a 3-bedroom ranch over on Forest Park right there by Glenwood. And I had gotten a little bit mouthy with her, and our grandfather had taken my room because of health issues. He was being cared for by my parents. So they converted the basement den into my room. So I was down in a cave basically. And she would wait and just sit when she knew she had to get me. And by get me, I mean punish me. And she'd sit at the top of the steps on the other side of the door. And when I'd open the door, she'd bust out and crack me right in the mouth with the wooden spoon. And, I loved it because I got a little bit of discipline, but I also got a little bit of love for Mom because I knew she cared enough that she wasn't going to put up with my crap. And, it's funny. And to this day, these guys, all my buddies, they still talk about, we were all joking around about each other's moms, and, moms be this and moms be that, playing dozens and what have you, and just cracking jokes. And I think one of the funniest ones was one of our friends, our mutual friends, not Batch, but another mutual friend, used to tease me and call my mother Bloody Mary. Well, she heard about it one time, and she lost her mind on that individual next time he was at the house. And I sat there and just laughed. You can't do nothing. If Mary's mad, she's mad, but she's absolutely a blessing. I can't say how much wonderful I've been spoiled to have her as my mom.
Now, with having a mother who has been a nun, taught in Catholic school, you guys certainly follow that pathway and that tradition. You get your start out at St. Charles. Can you take me through some of that experience of what a Catholic education means to an individual, and put that in context with the experience that you've had on the public school side?
Sure. To juxtapose both, the biggest difference is the inclusion of religion. And, otherwise you got your 4 core subject matters, you've got electives, but you're kind of reared a little bit differently. I mean, they talk about when you graduate from Cardinal Mooney, having the attributes of sanctity, scholarship, and discipline. Well, that gets embedded to you from a young point in time in a parochial education. And, I'm not saying I was the easiest child for my parents to have, but by their rules and raising, and then what the teachers and nuns taught us at St. Charles, it really shaped me as a character, as a young man. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I look back on these old photos that I got from my childhood, and I'm just completely awash because my mom kept things of like, I was the shepherd at the Christmas church for, the birth of Jesus. And, I ended up playing Jesus in a 8th grade play at one point in time. And, it was just, it's shaped me and my character to who I am today, but it didn't limit us. I mean, we still had all the experiences everybody else did. And Like I said, the only difference is religion. And I am still a Roman Catholic, but I don't go to church like I once did, and that doesn't really make my mother happy. But at the same point in time, we're all kind of on understanding of where I'm at, and I can go to church and I can be with her and say the prayers and take part in the ceremony and absolutely love being there. But at the end of the day, God always kind of talks to us, and in the Bible, where two or more are gathered in His name, that's good enough. And I really feel that that's good enough, because we're not all going to share the same views. We're not all going to share the same religion. But if two of you are together and just in that act of kind of praying and being there, I think the Lord's present in those relationships, in those moments.
Now, I have memories of, trailing along with Jeremy, who was your classmate, and coming to your house on a few occasions and really feeling like it was an open and inviting place. Um, when you talk about the differences of what is the Youngstown side, what is the Boardman side, I think sometimes we think those two places are worlds away. But as we progress into adulthood, we realize it doesn't really matter what your zip code is. People have experiences, good and bad, in all parts and all places. Now, for you, going into that athletic lane, who were your early influences or people that you looked up to as you started to find your identity as an athlete?
It's funny, when we were in grade school, I liked, Vince Morrow and Bo Pelini. Those were the guys I started watching when I was like in fourth and fifth grade. And then coming up, the 87 team with Ray Allen and Coleman and them guys, I watched them. And I wanted to be at Mooney, but I wrestled with that decision. I mean, it's funny that you talk about the Youngstown Boardman thing. I was in eighth grade, and really and truly up to probably February of that year, I was going to go to Boardman. Mom taught in Boardman. I was just going to go and become one of the Spartans. I'd played as a little kid with all those guys. And, what ended up changing my mind and leading me towards Mooney was the fact that, at the time, Mooney scholars, and not just the athletes, but scholars, were getting scholarships out the wazoo and left and right. And I knew that, having my dad be a public servant and my mom be a teacher, I was going to have to figure out a way to either pay for school or help pay for school by getting some scholarships. And so I ended up talking to the guidance counselor at Boardman, and then I ended up talking to a guidance counselor at Mooney. And I'll never forget, it's nothing right now, but she was showing us back then that the class of 1987 had gotten $1.2 million in scholarships. And I knew right away, as soon as I heard that, I knew where I was going. But, some of the other influences on me, I mean, if you're talking about what I grew up wanting to be, I really fell in love with basketball at first. I was tall for my age always and super skinny. I was in eighth grade and I was 6'3" and 135 pounds. So, I was like just a string bean with my nice mullet, by the way. And, if you kind of look at all those things and you think back, and it's just funny to think back and say, I liked Mark Gallery. I like Never Nervous Purvis Ellison. I like Johnny Dawkins. And for whatever reason, I hated North Carolina. And the fact that Batch loved Carolina and I loved Duke really helped even foster our relationship deeper, because we would bust each other's chops, even growing up there, through that, from the time we were, sixth grade basketball camp at Cardinal Mooney till these days. I mean, that's 30 some years. That just doesn't go away.
It speaks to the relationships and how committed individuals are to the people that are important to them when you come out of a place like Youngstown. I think you can look in all different pockets of the city and see people still stay connected and involved and interested in what a person is doing, even if distance sometimes pulls you away for work, family life, or what have you. Uh, I think every person to a man can probably pull 2 to 3 people that they've probably known since the early parts of elementary school, and they still have that same bond and that same relationship from way back when.
Yeah, it's just and when you find those cherished friends and loved ones, you hold them dear to your heart, and you're there for them as much as you can.
Yeah, I agree. There's nothing like having a Youngstown friend on your side in those dark
Nothing like
days
it.
and those tough days.
Nothing like it.
Well, let's talk about that tradition and that program over there on Erie Street. Of course, we know you're part of the regime under the great Don Bucci. Uh, the teams that you brought up, 86, 87, and some of those names that you brought up, there's just a laundry list of guys that have come through that school. Talking to Jeremy, Chris Emile, Andre Jackson, Batch, and even Chuck Marlowe as well. We've gotten that basic foundation of what the program is grounded in terms of offense, defense, tough teams, disciplined teams. For you, I'm kind of interested in how you view how the program was set up and run now that you have a coach's eye and you've walked in those same shoes. Could you start by kind of speaking to the philosophy, in your opinion, of what Mooney football was about, and kind of connect that to your philosophy as an individual coach, putting stamps on your own programs that you've been involved with?
Yeah. I would sum up my Mooney philosophy as stay the course. And, whether that be the pattern of footwork that you had to take to complete a 3-block, to complete a 2-block, to complete a Whammet, all these terms that, we grew up with as Mooney Cardinals. Sometimes when you speak to this stuff with other people, they have no idea what you're talking about because they weren't trained in that minutia, those details that are, put your step at the 45-degree angle, pivot your other foot, step, roll the hips, the whole 9 yards. It was an experience and a half. I mean, I loved a lot of my coaches at Mooney. I grew to get close to some of them, and some of them have had influences on my career, and I still talk to them every once in a while. I mean, I saw Dap last night, and of course we hugged and said hello to one another, and they're just kind of checking on each other. So those guys in that time was awesome. I mean, all those guys you mentioned were tremendous football players at Cardinal Mooney. They did awesome things. I mean, things that you just can't, you can't even, begin to understand until you're doing it. I guess, as Jeremy says, when it all gets down to it, you got to run belly left. And their thought process behind that being that, belly left is one of the first plays installed, and belly left is run behind Jeremy. And to this day, I still kind of follow what Jeremy has done. He's definitely been a leader, and he's put in place for me opportunities that may not have been afforded to me had I not been at Cardinal Mooney with him, going through the grit and the grime, those 5-hour practices, our dads parking their cars on the hill overlooking the practice field to shine their lights on so Mr. Bucci could have us out there, doing things until he was happy. And if that meant we ran the same play 22, 23 times, by gum, we was going to run it 22, 23 times. We were going to do it until that man was satisfied that it was muscle memory and ingrained in us, not only as philosophy, but also as mission and vision. And that helped shape me as a coach, in that when I became a leader of men, I stepped forward not only knowing that I knew the X and an O's aspect of the game, but that I wanted to convey the love of a sport, the love of a routine, the getting into and staying the course, as it were, in order to build a program. And, I'm not saying I was perfect as a coach. God knows I wasn't. Did I make mistakes? Absolutely. But who hasn't when you really look at it? The thing about it, I want to, be upfront about is, I love kids. I love being in their lives. I love being an influence. I just think that this was a calling to be a steward on the learning field in general. I mean, I believe I was a tremendous teacher in the classroom. I think I've got lots of students, who I've had before will attest to that. And I think, I was a tremendous football coach at one point in time. And I don't know, Chris, maybe the time has passed me by.
Well, I think in terms of that and your last statement, there's peaks and valleys when it comes to the game of football and really sport in general, because, you can't stay on top forever. Some are more lucky than others to get a long run and have a dynasty. But, there's going to be some years where you just don't quite have enough, or what you're teaching just isn't translating to the whole team as a group and working as a collective. But I think that's the appeal to even being a coach, is you want that challenge. Because if you're just winning all of the time and everything comes easy, how do you stay engaged? What is your purpose? What drives you to come back and do it again if it's just on autopilot? When you talk about your days as a Mooney athlete, what are those keys for you, and what are those standout memories for you in terms of games, competition, camaraderie with the guys that you came through that program with?
Well, I can't speak enough about the camaraderie. So many of us still keep in touch with one another from those times. Michael French even came out and he coached for me when I was at Milton. We maintained tremendous bonds with a lot of us, even just in routine day-to-day things. And, I would say that the hard part for me right now is just saying that, that love for a brotherhood, that love of being a part of something is something that I cherish and I try to take forward with me into my coaching career. And as you said, we're going to see peaks, you're going to see valleys. But it also runs in spurts. If you finally get to the place where you put something together and have what in essence becomes a program, not just a team, but you're able to put in a program and establish a system and get that system, flowing in and out of your veins and everybody's veins that's out there. You bleed the same blood. I mean, that's what Mr. Bucci was so great at. He crafted us together so that we were gonna fight to the end, and we were gonna do it just because we were Cardinal Mooney Cardinals. And I tried to do that and build that into, the Jackson Milton program. And later on, I started to put the groundwork in at Youngstown East. And, sometimes you just kind of realize when your message isn't working anymore, and maybe it's me, maybe it's the kids, but it was time to step away and kind of evaluate where I'm at in my life right now.
I'm glad you brought up Mike French. With us being tied together through Jeremy, I got to see you guys in action and see the type of program that you guys had, and then also was personal friends with a lot of guys that you played with. So as we talk about that time frame that you would have been in Mooney, 89 season through the 92 or 91 season, which would have been you guys senior year. Some of the moments and those visions that stand out is, I was in the stands when you guys went against Harding and Corey Stringer, LaShawn Daniels, that Boardman game in 91, 6-0 loss at YSU. I was there when you guys played Woodland Hills from over there in Pittsburgh, PA, and ended up being teammates with a lot of guys on that team. Do you remember Jason Taylor
Absolutely.
in that game playing safety, looking like the biggest guy on the field? But in terms of, you guys group, I think Andre Jackson, he made reference to it when him and I had a conversation on here, is he thought that the one thing that Coach Bucci was able to always do was to convince guys that may not have had, the greatest metrics or the most speed to play well above what they ever thought they were capable of doing in their own right. And then I think that matches with what you've explained in terms of just that work ethic, that fundamental foundation of knowing the little details and the minute. Like Mike French, like when you turn on the film from you guys here, you see him stepping through A and B gaps, tackling everything that moved. You talk about guys like Trav, Chad McGarry, Dwayne Thomas, Brian Mirasol, Brian Tabola, Rob Jones. Individually, you got some guys that have everything that you would want in developing a player if you could pick from a pile. But to see how you guys played as a unit, and that everybody knew their job, everybody knew their role, and it all worked for the greater good. I think that is a big key to what is success for that Mooney program, especially during those days of those long runs and in playoffs and state championships. That program really set the standard for what the mountaintop of Youngstown football really is. For you, what did that Mooney-Ursuline rivalry mean, year to year for you as you kind of came up through that program?
Well, the best thing I can say about that is we were 4-0 my sophomore through senior year versus the Ursuline varsity. We never lost to Ursuline. In fact, beat them twice my junior year. Week 10, turn around, play them week 1 in the playoffs, week 11. And, we never lost to them. But I had tremendous respect for Ursuline. They were similar to us. A lot of them were Catholic schoolboys, and they just kind of came at a time in our life where I cherish that memory of those rivalries, because there's nothing like a pep rally to bring you back to life. There's no memory better than, standing in the stairwell, coming out of the Mooney locker to go up to the gym to have a pep rally with all of the students. It just, I got hair standing up. I got chills just talking about that memory, because it's very powerful and it's very meaningful. And you can't help but think about, all the great players on both sides of that rivalry that have influenced the game, so much. I mean, even in terms of picking people from the area. I mean, you said Rob Jones went to Ohio State. Diallo Anderson went to Michigan. I mean, you don't get bigger than those two programs. And those were, kids from my era that went to the big time. It was awesome time, man. Awesome.
Now, with you having just as many ties over on the Boardman side, what did that game mean to you? And specifically the year that you guys played and, Coach Stoops went down during that game. What are those memories like for you when you would go out and play in Spartan Stadium, or the year that you guys would bring them over and play at YSU?
Yeah, those were great experiences. I'll tell you this: it was really bizarre our freshman year at Mooney, in that a couple guys every ball game got picked to be towel boys for the varsity football team, and then if it was a home game, the rest of us were selling programs at every gate so that the program itself could get money. So we go to the Boardman week, and we're going to Boardman Stadium, and it's my week to be a ball boy or a towel boy. And I'm on the sidelines, and I was kind of keeping with the ball. And I can remember it distinctly when Coach Stoops went down, and I mean, there were tears being shed by these, kids that I was basically afraid of. They were juniors and sophomores and seniors, and they were out there playing varsity football. And here I am, this punk kid of a freshman, sitting on the sideline holding towels, and I'm watching all these guys cry as Coach Stoops is getting loaded up. And, it's a haunting memory. But it showed the power and the cohesion that a group can come together over and still try to fight, even though going through a powerful loss like that. That was a tremendous blow to ego, skill, manhood. It challenged us. And as we continue to grow on and grow up, sophomore year, we played Boardman at YSU, and it just wasn't the game, for us. We didn't play real well that game, and turn around junior year and have arguably the most epic battle in the Youngstown area of all time. Mooney and Boardman, both undefeated, going into week 7 and play to an overtime game. And, we come up just short 17 to 16. We went for the 2-point conversion and didn't get it at the end of the game. But I mean, I can remember just listening to the play calls and being out there going into our senior year, where we end up having to play an afternoon game on a Saturday. Ursuline had it on Friday night. Believe the City Series had it on Thursdays back then. And then YSU was playing Saturday night, so we had to squeeze in our home game at that point in time, and it was a Saturday afternoon. I'll remember because it was a little later in the year, but it was just so hot. The sun was coming down, and it was beating off that turf, and I can just remember it just being so hot and people cramping, and our defense coming to the sidelines, and we were kind of in shock because Boardman came out and they did something that they hadn't done on tape all year, and they played with these 6-foot splits, and they were running the wing tee at the time, and they were creating just real natural traps that would just happen. And they'd run the wiggles and the waggles out of that wing tee scheme, and one of the wingback counters really cost us in the third quarter of that ball game. But we just couldn't seem to get it going consistently. I mean, we'd have 8, 9, 10 play drives and just couldn't punch it in. We'd get down to, 25-yard line. And, we had at the time, a kicker who came over from Holland, I believe. Rick Stiglitz was his name. And he probably had the leg that may have been able to make a field goal or two back then. But we just didn't. That was something we didn't practice as much as probably we should have. And then knowing Mr. Bucci and his tenacity and grit, he wasn't going to allow us to just kick field goals at the end of the drives. He was going to make us fight for every inch, for every breath. And, unfortunately, it never happened for us while I was at Mooney against Boardman.
With you saying that and touching on that point, that type of mindset, because I remember when you guys had Rick, and he had a powerful leg. He consistently put kickoffs up through the uprights out the back of the end zone. But, your program philosophy is stack eye, belly left, belly right, power, and maybe a boot pass here and there. To live and die by that, how does that mindset kind of propel guys like yourself, Bachelor, others that have come through that program? How does that take you into that next step of life and traversing through manhood, traversing through college, and dealing with challenges as they come up?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that, my days at Mooney definitely shaped who I am as a man. I really excelled at Mooney academically and was able to get an academic scholarship to John Carroll University up in University Heights, Ohio. And did not do as well academically my freshman year as I probably could have, nor should have. And I remember being very, very embarrassed about my GPA that first semester. I believe it was the first time in my life, besides grade school, when I was bringing home C's. And to be honest with you, I was happy to get C's because them classes were hard. They try to weed you out those first couple of years in those schools, and they throw a lot at you. And I'll be real with you, I was not mature enough to handle being away from home at that point in time as a freshman. I just 18 years old and just did not have the grasp on how to be a college student successfully. I grew to change that. I mean, as I went on, and it was just a matter of, really getting to the grind and sticking to a path and getting into like a calling, I shall say. Because, I go up there and I had this tremendous math science background. I'm thinking I'm going to go be an engineer. And I take the physics class, and it was just too much for me at that point in time. And I'd had physics in high school, but in college, it was just a complete other level. And so then I said, well, I love math, so I'm going to go business. And so second semester, I change over and I'm a business guy now. And I take microeconomics and all these other like business related courses, advertising 101 or something to that effect. And I get all A's, and the only D I've ever gotten in my life came in microeconomics. And again, I was like, I just don't know. So then I went home and I met a man by the name of Pat Gulling. He was a member of St. Charles Church where my parents went. And doing some church youth activity, met him. And next thing you know, I go back to school, and I've switched to become an education major, and come home that Christmas, and Pat asked me to help him coach girls basketball. So that was my first foray into actual coaching and teaching. I was with a girls basketball, a 7th grade team. I'm 19 years old. I have no idea how to communicate with a 12-year-old girl. So I stuck to the basics. What did I know? How to dribble, how to run, how to get your hands up on defense, how to move your feet. And, we had some real nice group of girls there. Some of them, it's funny, I'm still friends with on Facebook to this day, and I know Facebook's not the end all be all for relationships, but it's neat when you can touch somebody from or keep in touch with somebody from your past that, you had an influence on their life and they influenced yours, because I went back and I just absolutely went after my education degree after coaching. I knew it was just what was meant to be.
Now you go to John Carroll with one of your best friends, Jeremy Bachelor. He's a guy that's, a big key to both of our lives.
Absolutely.
I've heard his version of his experience in that program under Coach DiCarlo, and then I'm familiar with what the OAC is and what that entails through my experience with Capital. For you, what was that transition like? Coming from a family program like Mooney, going into John Carroll, which is a very competitive academic university. But on the football side, it's good football, but then you have this behemoth in the league, Mount Union, that just keeps getting it year after year after year. What were your experiences like on the gridiron? What were your experiences like in terms of coming from that key attention to detail and that hyper focus towards that goal of success and winning and representing, and then you're finding yourself up in Cleveland and University Heights, and you're having to refigure what football is at another level, and it's not with the program or the guys or the men that you've grown up admiring.
Well, I think in terms of our John Carroll experience, I had a little bit better experience than Jeremy did. I think a lot of that, and I'm not going to beat around the bush, I think a lot of that had to do with race and the fact that he stood out, whereas I blended in, but I really didn't blend in. But it was just more accepting, I think, because of the color of my skin. But as you move through that program, we're so used to being regimented and staying the course and running our course that we ran 4, 5, 6 plays at Mooney, and you go up there and the first day you're there, they hand you a playbook and you've got 95 different plays out of 22 formations, and you got to get used to the play calls. And we went from a trips belly left to pro wing I 46 counter, and it was so different than what we had at John Carroll. And when I was at Mooney, I always felt like the game was changing a little bit. We were coming to the end of the power run scheme that Woody Hayes and Bo Schembechler had really made so famous in the 70s, 10-year war and everything else. The wishbone was going away at that point in time. It wasn't being run like the Nebraskas, Colorados, and Oklahomas of the world had. And the game was changing. And I was excited for the change because I felt like when we were at Mooney, we were a little bit limited with our plays in that we didn't have much of a passing attack to spread the field, so to speak. You can only run 34 and up and 78 so many times. And those were references to the pass tree that was popular back then in the coaching circles. And I really believe that, when we went to Carroll, I kind of fell in love with the game at a little bit deeper level, even more than I did at Mooney. And I'm going to say that only because I actually grew. I grew into my body. I was able to get some, man strength from being a boy, basically. And, growing into my body. I went to John Carroll at 165 pounds in the summer and come home at 219 pounds. And my mother's like, "Did you eat everything?" And, I really had, because, it was just a different time. We'd stay up and look at our playbooks, and 11 o'clock at night, call Papa John's and get a pizza. So, it was just, and that might've been every night of the week, in addition to studies. But, Tony DiCarlo, he was great to me. At the time, when he was up there, it was getting towards the end of his career, and, he wasn't always around. He'd been sick a little bit, but he was a great mentor and had an open door policy. You could go and talk to him whenever you wanted. he'd open up study tables for you at 6 a.m, and he'd come back at night and shut the room down at 12 o'clock at night, and it was different. I'd never seen a man with so many boys that were changing into men know everybody's name, know where they went to high school, knew their parents. He was an unbelievable just encyclopedia of knowledge, especially about his kids. And that really appealed to me. That there really shaped a lot of my career moving forward. I was sick at the time and couldn't finish playing. I had some abdominal disorders, and later on in life found out I actually suffer from Crohn's disease, which kind of limited me as an athlete, as you can imagine. But I still I tried, I worked hard. I wanted to be a part of a team. There's nothing like that team bonding, team building experience. And if you get in there and it's the right group of men and the right time, and man, it's awesome. It's just awesome.
So, two of my guys decided around 1997 that they're going to take their talents down to the South. Yourself and Mr. Batchelor, you find yourself down in Bladen County, and then you find yourself on opposite ends of the coaching spectrum as local rivals there. Tell me a bit about your experience, getting that opportunity to coach middle school football down in that area, what you brought from your experiences up in the North, and how you imparted those to kids that, culturally it's a different world down there in terms of how things are paced, what the level of commitment is, or, in our area, we could tend to specialize. Down there, you get kids that play a variety of different sports, and, it's not a live or die by football in those parts.
No.
So can you tell me about some of that time period and then
Sure.
progress into your coaching progression?
Absolutely. Went down to North Carolina kind of on a whim. Had talking to Jeremy's cousin at the time, and she was the director of personnel for Bladen County. They had an opening for a math job in the 6th grade at the Clarkton School of Discovery. I interviewed with Mr. Campbell on a Saturday morning, and on Monday we started school. And it was that fast. At the time, I was blessed when Batch and I had gone down. We stayed with his Uncle JC and Aunt Joanne in their house in downtown Elizabethtown. And, if Jeremy stood out at John Carroll, I stood out in Bladen County, especially in Elizabethtown, or in that section of town called Newtown, as the locals refer to it. And, we stayed with them for a few weeks, and then we were able to find our place. And we moved into a condominium at White Lake, North Carolina. And we lived out there, go to school, and find out that unlike Ohio, they don't start practice before school starts for football. I believe it was into the second week of the school year before we started football. And we played 7 games. I think at Clarkton, I think Bladen Middle played 6, because we had to play a team, Tabor City, which is just down the road. And I don't think they had that game. But, it was funny because going into that season, Coach Melvin was the head football coach, and he had been calling the plays for a bunch of years. And that was the year he kind of took ill health, and he let me decide to call the offense for him. But I had to run their plays. So I couldn't bring any of my nuances to the game, so to speak. So we were a dead T team. three backs across, lined up behind guard, center, and guard, with a quarterback underneath. And we were running your basic dives and your counters and whatnot. And I do believe that overall that Clarkton team was more athletic than Jeremy's East Bladen team, or Bladen Middle, I should say. But he had two studs in Richie Priest and A. King Elton, and they ran a toss and a toss pass and ate us up. And I believe the final score was 21-14 or 21-7. I can't recall. I know we didn't score but once, so it was 21-7, I think. And of course, Jeremy and Mr. Hall had to let me hear about it because, I kind of hung out with them guys. But, it was a great time, but it led me know that I really love the game. And, when I'd gone to John Carroll, I hadn't student taught because I was working for Federal Express. And I thought I was going to get promoted into the management program and get moved down to Memphis in February of 97, that is. And every time I got going, it just seemed like something got thrown up because they canceled the management program, and I lost my job at FedEx. I was, part of the crew that got nixed as, not having as much experience. So I came home and I was living at my parents' house, and probably driving them absolutely crazy because I was a 22-year-old kid trying to go out every night of the week. And, it is what it was. And I got a job selling Acura cars at Whetstone's Acura of Boardman, and worked for Jerry Sanford, who was a huge football guy. And Jerry and I would talk all the time about the games, and him and Kenny Simpson playing at Howland. And I got to hear about some of their epic rivalries against, the Warren Hardings and the Warren West Reserves of the world. And, every time I got in a conversation with people, I just knew more and more that I was getting called back to coaching and teaching. And got that opportunity in North Carolina, went down, ended up coaching football in the fall, coached boys basketball in the winter and girls softball in the spring, and drove the blue bus, the Clarkton blue bus. Yeah, that was an interesting time. I got to drive the bus down there, but it was great. I loved that time in my life. It was just, North Carolina was so different. I mean, even just the basic rates of pay. I think my contract, I have it downstairs, I believe. It's $21,500 to teach in 1997. So, it was just, such a different time. You had to do every other thing to make ends meet. That's why I coached so many sports. But I did love it. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying, but that was my way of getting another job. I just, I don't think I would have flourished, at that time down there. Bladen County is mostly dry. So I don't think I could have worked as a bartender or as a server. I couldn't have probably stacked grocery shelves because, that night term would cut into my sleep getting ready for school the next day. So, we went into coaching and we had some good times down there. After my first year, I left and I came home and student taught at Schauffen's Career Center. I was eighth grade algebra class with Margaret Furtado. And while I was there, I coached freshman football at Mooney, who went back, and worked with Brendan McLeod and Travis Galladay, who you mentioned earlier. And, Trav and I were real tight for a number of years. And, I miss him. I miss our friendship. But, we've grown apart as we've gotten older, and those things happen sometimes. But, after I went to Mooney, I went down back to North Carolina and was at John T. Hoggard in Wilmington at the high school, and worked for a man by the name of Scott Braswell. And Scott had won a state title at Olympic High School in Charlotte and had the opportunity to come to Hoggard, which was the equivalent of a D1 school down there, like just a 4,000 kids type of place. And was able to coach on his staff and learn some other nuances of the game, brought some of the things that I had learned and liked from college and, what you pick up watching tape, and was blessed to be there for a year. And then got married, found my wife down there, and little boy Michael, and gave Amy the chance to make the choice. I says, okay, we're either going to go to Jacksonville, Florida, because they're hiring teachers out the wazoo and you're getting a huge bonus, or we're going to go back to Ohio. And well, you know how that ended up, because I ended up back up here up north. And, my teaching career and coaching career, it started at Warren G. Harding High School. And I was teaching 7th grade math at Warren Western Reserve Middle School. It was after they had come together to become one team and one town. And Coach McDaniels was just an awesome influence. I got actually an interview on his staff because Josh, currently the head coach of Las Vegas, was a teammate of ours at John Carroll, and pulled some strings and got an interview and got on that staff, and coached at Warren Harding from 2000 to 2003. Worked primarily with the freshman program with two guys three I absolutely adore. I just had lost tabs on them, and Jimmy Spain, Guy Esposito, and Ronnie Brown. But those guys really touched me. But that Harding staff was unbelievable, because on that staff at that time, there's DJ Doda, who's now the head coach of Boardman. There's Dan Reardon, who's currently at Ursuline. There's John Arlesic, who's the athletic director down in Steubenville. There's Matty Richardson, the offensive coordinator at Akron-Hoban. Dom Leone, who was the head football coach out at Mineral Ridge and took them to the playoffs a couple times after that. And the list goes on and on. Angelo Seminaro, who still out on the Canfield staff doing their offensive and defensive lines, I believe. I know he was offensive line. We just had a good staff, great group of guys. We got along. Sammy Caputo, who's the superintendent at Girard. It was just an awesome staff and a lot of high quality, high character guys. And I think that, we pulled together at that point in time and led Harding to some success. They had fallen off for a couple years, and I believe we went 7-3, 9-1, 14-1, lost the state title game our third year there, and then at 8-2 and lost the first round of playoffs to Massillon the year after that with a kid named Mario Manningham, who went on to Michigan, and he just blossomed up there. But we had some good relationships with kids, and I think that's really what it was all about. They needed to trust us before they could trust what the hell we knew. And they bought in. And when you buy in like that, you have the buy-in there, success follows. Later on, Marty Tinkler got a football job at Stowe, Monroe Falls, and was able to get me an interview. And I went over there and I became his defensive coordinator for 1 year. Really enjoyed my time in Stowe. A couple guys, again, still friends with on that Facebook stuff from those years. Just good times. Worked with a couple of great guys there. And then went on to Jackson Milton. Coached for 3 years. Third year, my dad died. So then I ended up taking a couple of years off. And when the job reopened, I had been teaching at Milton the whole time. And a couple of the kids back then, like John Girardi, Brendan Morrison, all these kids, we had a great relationship from when they had me in class. They basically talked me into reapplying, and I got the job, and then I was out there for a number of years after that. And we struggled out there. We tried to run spread. My second year back, my first 3 years I was there, we ran the stack guy. We went 6-4 my second year. The place celebrated like we had won the national title. Those kids were adored. And this is something I truly believe this, that football season sets the tone for how the school year goes. If the team's good and the kids are buying in, even like the student body, when they're watching the games, if there's buy-in all the way through, you're going to have a great year school-wise. And that 2006 team with Mike Nagy, Josh Behringer, all those kids from back then, Nicky McLaren, Matt Shields, Brian Gibbs, Cheddar Gibbs, those kids, they bought in and they shaped, the culture and climate of the school. And, when I went back, we tried to run some spread thinking we were going to be different, and it didn't work. And then we ran the wing T for a year. And then my offensive coordinator, Matt Ruby, and I, we had gone to a couple of clinics and stuff, and Matt was blessed to sit down with a gentleman by the name of Tim Hall from Western Reserve. And at the time, Mike Apache was out there, from Cheney Lore. And Tim taught Matt and I the inside zone. He taught us counter, all out of one back. And the reason we were running out of one back is because in order to cover 4 receivers, the team had to take, on the defensive side, people out of the box. And then we would just try to play, run at your mismatches as best we could. Still tried to be, pretty varied.
So, with those 2 different stints that you had and changing the profile of the program as you grow and you learn more, when we talk about Jackson Milton, we're not talking about a large pool of kids where you just have multiple people to pick from. You're playing some real Iron Man ball at that level.
Had to put pads on to get through practices during the week, literally, because we just didn't have enough kids to simulate what the other team was going to be doing. So, we're in the huddle holding up cards, and then we're going and we're blocking for the kids that are running the ball, and you just try to get a look. It was great times. I mean, I'm blessed that I was young enough that I could still get out there and bang with the kids, and lucky enough I didn't hurt anybody, so I didn't get charged with, child endangerment or anything. But it was a fun time. It was a different time. What was the changing point was we had 5 seniors one year, and those 5 seniors refused to buy into anything at any athletic program at Jackson Milton, and we went 0-10 their senior year. And my job was on the line. Like, literally, they were going to try to change to a coach, and a group of parents came forward and said, no, we want Mark running this team. We want Coach Ace here. And the following year we went 6-4, come back and went 3-7. And then the 7-3 team, which was the first team in school history to make the playoffs. And then we duplicate that the next year. And I'm thinking, we're on a run here. We're going to be, Oklahoma, Nebraska type of dynasty. We're going to start building and taking that next steps. And, for whatever reason there, let's put it this way. I said something cursing at kids and in my coaching, like all coaches tend to do, but I got called on the carpet for it. And I was asked to resign my position. And, a young man had accused me of saying something that I did not say. I had 32 of the 33 kids at the time said I didn't say it. And all 5 of my assistant coaches at the time said I didn't say it. But, once an accusation like that gets made, it can really ruin a career, ruin a man. And it took a lot out of me at that point in time. I was hurting for a while, years. And, I had to go and seek myself out some help, and I got that help. And I think it has improved me as a man. It's definitely improved me as a husband and as a father. And I know it's influenced, my career decisions as well, because, when I came back to coaching, I came back as a dean and had accepted my first administrative position. And that leads me to where I'm at now as an assistant principal at Cheney Middle.
Well, when you go through that trajectory and get to build something that at one point was light regarded, and then you get the chance to coach your own son and have that shared success with him, and get the confirmation to yourself that you're able to do it. You're able to put yourself in regards to the other teams and competition in your area, a cut above and be recognized. You were recognized as the coach of the year 2 times through the MVCA.
Yeah. 2006 with
what,
the 6-4 team, and 2015 with the first playoff team.
when you think back about those experiences and those shared moments with some of your closest friends, your own family, if you had that one more down to repeat or do over again out of the course of your career, whether that be as a player, a coach, a teacher, an administrator, a husband, or a father, what would that one be for you?
It would be my son's senior year, 2015. We played Western Reserve, and we missed 2 extra points. And if I could go back, I would have called for 2 points on both of those. Our short snapper on field goal extra point had his hand stepped on earlier in the game and just wasn't snapping it back. And our center wasn't equipped to do the short snap on a field goal. We taught our center to kind of lob the ball back at the quarterback in a real short manner in shotgun, and to snap those for field goal extra point, you need a tight spiral and you need that thing flying back there. And unfortunately, and our kid was hurt, and that's the 2 downs. I would go for 2 both times, because if we get it once, we tie. We get it twice, we win, and it is what it is.
When I think back, I've known of you and known you really for 30 plus years at this point.
Yeah.
To see that side of you and get to observe as an outsider and a fan and just, a person who loves the game and see that growth in you. I've always heard great things about your teaching. I know your character as an individual has been on display, and it's always been consistent. It'll be interesting to see your progression as you embark on this career in administration, and, taking those experiences from the field, from the classroom, and then applying them to administration. I don't see anything but great things ahead of you. I don't know if you're going to get 40 years in like Mrs. Asen, but, whatever time you got left, I hope you take that Cardinal approach and work on the small details and knowing your steps and being able to execute.